having been raised as a materialist, it's hard to feel spiritual.
Nope, it's not. Here's exactly and precisely how. So this video is for anyone who wants to know how to have that spiritual feeling precisely and exactly. I'm going to give you tried and tested methodologies here from 30 years in the business plus about 3,000 years of sort of human spiritual technological tradition, exactly how to access it. It's not mysterious. It's been pretty well worked out by groups of people. It's something quite concrete that almost anyone can do. I've spent 30 years all over the world doing this with different kinds of people. For example, I run a charity in a war zone. I've worked with police, military, and many business people. Okay, so I was inspired by this video of Carl Benjamin from the Lotus Eaters, someone I like a lot, someone I respect. We've got mutual friends who say he's a really good guy. So I know a lot of people who may be conservative leaning, they've got that like religious impulse, they've got some sense that there's something bigger, but they kind of don't know where to start. So like Carl in his video, they're expressing a religious impulse, a spiritual impulse, but they go, well, how? How do he actually says I'm disabled in a particular way. It's kind of a harsh way to say it, but he's saying that there's an atrophied organ. I think that is a pretty good way to say it, that those of us who are raised in materialism, which is all of us moderns, myself included, aren't offered this in a systematic way. In fact, we're educated both consciously and unconsciously, continuously, not to connect spiritually. It's not that our third eye is just blind, it's been blinded. It's continuously being blinded. And there is a conspiracy to keep it that way. So if, like Carl, you're like, I don't know what to do. I want to be religious, I want to be spiritual, but it doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't seem logical. This is the video for you. I'm going to take you through 5 main methods, cross-culturally, have been used over the years, and I've used with clients to actually access the spiritual. I think many people today aren't like smug atheists. They're almost like unwilling or reluctant atheists. I heard Alex O'Connor, I think, describe himself that way too. He's a reluctant atheist. They don't want to be atheists. So why? That's the first thing, right? Like look inside yourself. Like why don't you want to be an atheist? And one is, well, as Carl rightly points out, look at the world materialism has built. It seems increasingly ugly. It seems increasingly brutal. It's dehumanizing. Doing Excel spreadsheets in a corporation, serving no higher power, it's just not something that appeals. The meaning crisis, as philosopher John Vervaeke calls it, and others, has led to increases in all kinds of unpleasant things that if I mention, I'll be demonetized on YouTube, but self-ending, let's say, medication, self-medication, there's another. I think this is really apparent, particularly to young guys. I've noticed that we need something more. It's actually normal to have something more. So 99.99% of your evolutionary ancestors were, as far as we can tell from history and cave art before history and prehistory, were religious, if not spiritual, were involved in altered states, saw the world as alive and animated and not a dead material thing, which is the worldview we're presented with today. So Carl talks about this as materialism, the worldview that everything is just stuff explains everything, and it seems to have made great gains, which Carl points to, the idea that we can explain things, all right? But what we can explain is what is. We can't explain why it is. We can't explain goodness, though we have that in our heart. There's an impulse there, yeah? We can't explain beauty, again, there's an impulse there. We can really just say, well, this is how you get a bridge. Construct a bridge. This is how we, something great like this iPhone, how we get a rocket to the moon. These are great achievements, but they're very much in the materialist space. And there's this idea of sort of progress inverted commas, that's all there is, and it's somehow removed the need for the spiritual, for the religious, and also that it explains everything, but it doesn't really explain anything. Like, okay, let's say there's a Big Bang. Okay, why? What happened before that? Try and get your head around the physics. It's pretty mind-blowing. More importantly, though, than the sort of physical aspects, is that the spiritual is not really there to explain the physical. And this is a mistake I hear Carl making, said the purpose of religion was to explain things materially. I don't think it ever really was. I mean, that the gods had a chariot that went round the sky or whatever. I don't think that was ever the main purpose of religion and spirituality. I think the main purpose was more about meaning and community and happiness and these elements of depth spirituality. The stories may have been there too. Maybe there are sort of peripheral elements. The river spirits explain something physical, but this is actually a materialistic view of spirituality. So it's it's an understandable mistake to make because that's the paradigm we're indoctrinated in essentially. But it's missing the point. The purpose of spirituality and religion isn't to explain physical phenomena. Science does that pretty well on the level it does. Though even that, when you look at it on the sort of big or small level, the cosmic or the quantum, it gets pretty weird. Consciousness comes back into the picture. This idea that materialism explains everything is pretty silly, actually. So, Carl sort of says materialism is one, or it's very persuasive. I don't think it's persuasive at all. I mean, you try this experiment. Close your eyes, open them. Consciousness. Scientific materialism has literally no explanation for that. And there's books by like Dennett and people who try, but they're not very persuasive. Like, what the hell is this? Like AI, for example. It's not artificial intelligence. It's not strong AI. It's not conscious. It's just pretending to be, right? It's just spitting out words. There's no interiority, as philosophers like Kent Wilber would describe it. There's no the isness of the moment that you're experiencing right now watching this video. So on the one level, as soon as you open your eyes in the morning and wake up, you're immediately rejecting the idea of materialism. And you understand this, right? Like a object like, I don't know, this sock that's sitting here, the illusion of beauty on YouTube. This sock, you understand that it's a thing, right? You understand that it lacks this consciousness. By the way, again, that's not the view of most of your ancestors. Most of your ancestors viewed everything as alive. Certainly the natural world, the river outside, the trees, this plant, that there was a spirit infusing everything. And again, this wasn't just an explanation of simple materialist forms. All right, so the other way I'd say that it's not very convincing is we all have a sense of goodness. We all have a moral intuition. Here, Carl expressed that. His moral philosophy is actually really solid. The guy's got a strong background, as far as I can tell, in philosophy because he's well-reasoned. But it doesn't start with logic and reason. Yeah, it's like if you see someone hurting a child, it's a physical thing. It's like, that's not okay. The anger that comes up, the protectiveness. And I don't think evolution's quite enough to explain this, certainly the subjectivity of it. Yeah, we can say certain morals come from our ancestry, whatever, they were pro-social. But even those arguments, they tend to rely on sort of dodgy group selection arguments, they're called in evolutionary theory, which are pretty dodgy. So there's a strong morality sense we have when we see something wrong. Right, we all know, like, why is it wrong to, I don't know, cousin, you know what, let's not go there because YouTube will demonetize me, but there's things we can all say are not good. Kitten torturing, there you go. No one likes seeing a kitten tortured. There's a strong, visceral, physical sense. Carl rightly intuits the body is one of our main gateways here. It's one of our main secrets. He talks about the atrophied soul, but then he also mentions the body briefly. This is my area. I'm going to come back to this shortly in the video. I will get to the practical how, I promise you. We just need a little philosophy first. Okay, the second one is this moral intuition. The third one would be beauty. We all have a sense of beauty. And, like the lotus eaters, they dress well. I watch them on YouTube. I go, these nicely dressed guys. And it makes me go, you know what, I'm going to put on a jacket for my video too. This is a wonderful thing. Beautiful women. I was just in a church here in Slovenia, and it's just beautiful cathedral, and it's just an intuition, even for like Japanese tourists with no Christian religion, they just have this instinct to go into the cathedral. We have an instinct. I was at Lake Boheme, for example, which is a beautiful lake near here. People all over the world come to Lake Bled or Lake Boheme just to see the beauty of it. I mean, this is worth like millions and millions of pounds for like tourism across Europe. I think Peterson and other people have pointed out that this urge for beauty is so natural. Like, it's just what we do. Even a very poor person, I worked in Africa and Ethiopia, for example, and someone would have a shantytown little house made of cardboard corrugated iron, but they try and make it beautiful. They put a rug down, they put some green grass in there, they try and make it beautiful. This is this instinct we have, which again doesn't have a logical, easy, materialist explanation. If you think about like our urge for romantic love, this is still in our culture that we love. We may have lost the idea of brotherly love. This has been seriously suppressed by our culture. Everything that is a bro is bad, like a tech bro or an orthodox bro. But romantic love is still there, and that is not logical. We don't work that out on an Excel spreadsheet looking at data. Yeah, this urge for connection, deep communion. Okay, enough blah, blah, blah. what's the basic thesis here? So the basic thesis here is I want to have a spiritual feeling, but my, like Carl says, that's atrophied. He says it's disabled. The first thing I'd say, he says he doesn't have an impulse for it, but I can see he does. It's clear he does. But I think people are placing money on Carl's Christian conversion. I don't want to do that because I think it's not respectful, to sort of someone's personal journey in psychology. But I know there are people placing money on it within the next year. So I do see that impulse in him. For you watching this, do you have that impulse? That's the beginning. That impulse is right. That intuition that there's something bigger. So I'm long-term sober, 19 years sober. 12-step programs rely on spirituality. That's the center of them. This is what gets people sober, because if you're really sort of, have this sort of mental, moral, physical sickness, you really need it. You need spirituality. I sometimes think the rest of the world's caught up with my alcoholic, drug addict friends. And the way they say is you become willing. And that's a choice. That's the beginning of sort of wanting spiritual experience. So you know what? I'm willing to have it. I'm open to it. I'm open to it. It's sort of like God requires your consent, right? That's it's like a poetic way of speaking about it. Like God and the devil actually both require your consent, your agreement. That's why the devil has to trick you, and God has to say like, hey, it's there if you want it. So what does that mean? The first thing is a decision. We become willing. 12-step, AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and other programs say you can have any higher power that's not you. I would be cautious to establish a higher power as another person, like your children or even your romantic partner. Community, a bit better, but still dangerous. This can lead to cults if you have your guru as your higher power. But some higher power, and just saying, you know what, I'm willing for some higher power to enter my life. You could say inner power, deeper power, higher power. These are metaphors, ultimately. They're directional metaphors. They're not the reality, which is ineffable. This willingness is the beginning. Okay, but then what do we do? What are these technologies, Mark, you've been teasing us with? So across human cultures, across human history, there's about 5 main technologies, main groups of practices. I've studied some of these in a lot of depth. So the first one is simple, is the body. Yeah, now there are anti-body traditions in spirituality, whipping oneself, whatever, but body traditions are in many kinds of spirituality. So you want to be more spiritual, go to the gym, get in your body. I regularly have spiritual experiences in the gym. I had one this morning, actually. It's pretty normal. Now, I have a particular draw to that. We have talents spiritually. So I'm not very humble, for example. That's a talent, for example, some people have. It may be cultural. My girlfriend's Italian. She jokes they're not very good at being humble. But for someone else, that might be submission, humility. That might be a strength. For me, a strength is being in the body, doing bodily things. Okay? So any bodily things done as a sacrament, done with an intentionality of deeper connection. Again, what is spirituality? You can think of it as deeper connection. That would be one way to look at it. Sometimes I call it theo-regulation, in the same way as we had self or co-regulation. So one way in is the body. Conscious dance is a thing. If you haven't come across that, hippies love it. By the way, a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about for my hippie friends, totally normal. But for my right-wing bro friends, this just stuff is just like, what? I've never heard of this, yeah? It's just funny. I want to take this technology from the hippies and give it to the conservatives who need it now. The conservatives are the ones saying, like, please tell me there's a God. And I'm like, I don't have to tell you. I can show you. You can feel it. You can experience it. Conscious dance, fire rhythms, for example. Movement medicine, there's a whole bunch out there. Beautiful, beautiful technology. Dance your way. This is a very pagan kind of orientation. I think weightlifting, especially if you're weightlifting fasted, you're weightlifting heavy, taking things to real failure, like Dorian Yates, blood and guts style. Google that if you don't know what it is. That's a great way to, you'll meet spirituality. Interestingly, Dorian Yates, who was a British Mr. Olympia, hardcore weightlifter, did everything to max. He became quite spiritual later in life. If you see videos from him now, very spiritual guy. Interestingly, I saw another study that 50% of American football players have had a spiritual experience. Playing American football, you wouldn't have thought this was like a big spiritual thing. But again, they're very physical. There's an intensity to it, yeah? I think especially for like young guys driven to intensity, the body can be it could be running, you see like the Goggins stuff. Like intensity is good for young men as a way in. It like smashes that container, that materialist shallow shell around us. Just fucking crack it right open. For me, it was martial arts. I used to get thrown around till I could barely stand by my teachers, and I'd be like, and eventually I would start having a breakthrough of spiritual experience. So I think this is one way in that's very accessible to young men, but particularly if there's like traditional martial arts, there can be an intentionality towards that, a sense that can happen. And living a sort of soft modern life that's very comfortable, that lacks intensity, you'll miss that. Okay, so the physical, there's loads more. Embodiment's my main area if you're new to watching this channel. So this is something I can say a lot more about. I can reliably give people spiritual experiences with embodiment. Reliably. It's like, if I feed people, they won't be hungry, right? If you lie down on the bed at night after a long day, you'll probably go to sleep. It's like that reliable. To me, it's like when people say, I don't know how to have a spiritual experience. It's like bizarre. It's so easy, but I get why. Our culture discourages it. All right. Next set of practices. So we've got the physical. This drugs, right? Not allowed to say it for YouTube. Medicines, that's what the hippies call them. So, Carl, come to Amsterdam with me. I'm there in December. It's legal there. This stuff you can do. I've been doing mushrooms since I was 14 years old. I'm not sure I'd recommend it for everyone. If you have a lot of mental health problems or in your family, you might want to avoid it. Certainly it's set and setting, it's called, is important. You could look up Ali Biner's book on this if you want a take on this modern take. The psychedelic renaissance is happening. I have lots of trauma therapist friends who are working with MDMA, ketamine, different things. You've got to be a bit careful with this stuff. I definitely know people have done too much ayahuasca, for example, and it's blown their head off. But by having spiritual state experiences, it can give you insight, it can give you a reference point to come back to start turning that state into a trait, okay? So I don't know if Carl has ever done these substances or done them in the container, the right setting, the right intentionality. I would even come to Reading, okay? And that is a sacrifice I'm willing to make for you, Carl, if you want to play with this stuff. Or Amsterdam, legally. Okay, so things to be careful of there. It's a very materialistic solution in a way to a materialistic problem. I think that's why it's popular. People kind of want a quick fix, quick solution. But certainly, I know people who have really had deep, lasting spiritual experiences, and there are studies on this. It can increase trait openness. A lot of people who do these substances say that, years later, it's had a real impact on their life. So this is something you can do. As I said, just be a bit cautious, setting matter. Last thing that matters, I'd say, is integration. So I know coaches and guides who do this in Amsterdam, for example, not just having a big experience that'll blow your head off, actually integrating it. For me, I did this stuff way too young, actually, and it took me some years to integrate it. I need the container of the discipline of martial arts till I could integrate some of these experiences. By the way, sometimes these experiences just happen through grace. Another area that people go to is sexual area. So there's the tantras, the intimate sexualities, conscious sexualities. My very first experiences as a teenager with a girl, well, if you're out there, you know who you are, were mystical experiences. There were what's called oceanic experiences, where you dissolve into everything. There's a sense of oneness that you dissolve into. This can happen for many people through a love experience or a sexual experience. I think the key thing here is the container of love. And this is where our materialistic, hedonistic view of sexuality, and I've got lost in this in the past, of just like, this is just sport, this is just pleasure. It's like, no. That will end badly. That will end in, well, it could be disease, could be heartbreak, could be all sorts of problems. Treating sexuality in some way as sacred, seeing that if not within marriage, then certainly with the container of commitment and intimacy, connection and trust. Like within that container, many people have an opening experience. And this is one that our culture hasn't managed to get rid of because, it has to reproduce. Though the sort of consumer materialism of modern dating and online dating has certainly reduced this, because people see it just as a source of pleasure, other people as objects, other people as a way to get your rocks off, objectification of men and women. So, when I see the Tates of this world, for example, encouraging that kind of objectification, I'm like, no, that's one of the main ways people find spirituality in the divine. Okay, so what do we got? We've got the body, we've got substances, we've got intimacy and sexuality, like having that container, and I think this naturally happens. Sometimes, by the way, this is just grace. My first there's a sort of talent in my family for these experiences. My mum was actually a nun, exploring this stuff for 7 years before she, okay, no jokes in the chat, but disrobed, that's the official term. After 7 years as a Catholic nun, as a novice, you can choose to either commit to life or she decided to be a mother. So she went off to university. Dad showed her around, good skills, Mr. Welsh, fist bumped me from heaven. Okay, so there's a certain talent in my family for some of these states, and they will happen by grace. You know, when I was a child, some of these states would hit me. Other people, though, like Carl, for example, maybe more intellectual, smart guy, they need a bit more work, right? And again, if you do the work, you will have the states. States can become insights, states can lead to trades, particularly in the context of community. Next one, ecology. Okay, many people's spiritual experiences from Wordsworth onwards are in nature. Beauty of nature, I mean, aesthetics generally, but the natural world, whether it's, you know, trekking through the rain in Scotland on a Duke of Edinburgh's expedition, whether it's fasting in a wilderness retreat and, you know, facing your death in the wilderness as an initiation, or just sitting in a pretty garden, sitting in Hyde Park and looking at the flowers. Many people have spiritual experiences in nature. Interesting, I asked my clients, I train coaches, that's my main profession. I asked my clients, where do you have your best insights, your best creative moments? And actually the most common response was either in the shower, where you're in your body, okay, you're relaxing it in your body, and the second one was in nature. Yeah, so this is just good for your brain. We call it eco-regulation, is a term, eco-regulation, term I made up. Okay, so nature can definitely be a spiritual opener for a lot of people. If Carl would have said to me, hey, I want to have a spiritual experience, I'd say, great, spend 3 hours a day in nature. Go for a walk in the morning, sit in your lunch break in the garden, go for a walk in the evening. Okay, 3 hours. Sounds like a lot, but, you know, it adds up. I deliberately live by a river and do my coaching calls in the botanic garden in my house. Like, you know, you can easily spend 5 hours a day in nature, even with a job and, you know, whatever. Yeah. So spending more time in nature for a lot of people will that organ he talks about that's atrophied will just start to come alive. You know, like I was by this beautiful lake in Slovenia with my trauma team from Ukraine. I supervise a charity there, and they come for some sort of healing and rest. And we're looking at this beautiful lake, and I was like, how could you be an atheist here? How is that possible? You know, people say there's no atheist in a trench, you know, in a war, because you're faced with that life and death existentialism. It's not always true, but it's often true. Equally, there's no atheists by the Grand Canyon. There's no atheists, you know, when you're struck by the beauty of creation. You know, a lot of mystics would go off into the desert for that kind, or the Himalayas. You know, I've been there. I've been to Negev, for example, in Israel. And when you're in those places, it's like, oh yeah, I guess maybe it was the Sahara for some in the, you know, the Muslims. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah. You start to realize there's something bigger than you. Nature, I mean, we've always stared up at the night sky for something bigger. It's not the materialistic explanation that religion was saying, oh, that's Orion, he's a god. No. It was the inspiration that come from staring up from the night sky, the sense of, I'm small, right? Generally, another approach is humility. And I'm not sure how Carl fares on this one. I said I don't know him personally. I know for me it's sometimes a challenge as a teacher. For us teachers, it can be difficult to be humble. And this is a way in. So this is why, you know, Islam is submission, surrender is important. I think as I've got older, it's got a bit easier as I've become less of a cocky young man. But certainly it's a challenge for us moderns who are told, you're the center of the universe. You're the most important thing. You know, this is massive growth of narcissism around the world. And narcissism is just spiritually like repugnant. It's the worst thing spiritually. So you learn this in alcoholism recovery, to be humble. That's why it's higher power. Yeah, not I know best. You know, I talked to this guy the other day who's just relapsing and he's been trying to get sober. He's not doing very well. And he's like, you know, I'm in charge of my life. I'm like, how's that working out for you, mate? How's that working out for you? Maybe it's time you put someone else in charge of your fucked up life. You know what I mean? And I think surrendering to a code, surrendering to a set of rules, and I tell you who does this well, right? Like Jewish people, they have like a code. They even like cut the end of the, you know, that's a big sacrifice. Or Mormons, right? Or Amish, you know, just to give a few groups. They have a code. My Muslim friends, they have a code. I might not like some aspects of their religion, but God, I respect the fact that they surrendered to something. Right? I was an Uber driver the other day. He was telling me about how he prays 5 times a day and how he does that as an Uber driver. I was like, wow, this guy's surrendered. You know, I've been in countries during Ramadan and they're fasting, and there's a surrender to that. Not like, well, I didn't see the point in this. There's a Chesterton's fence principle that maybe the fence exists for a reason. Maybe the tradition exists for a reason. Maybe let's be humble enough to not think, you know what, I know better. I know better. Yeah? Great. The key thing here, by the way, is practice. So, speaking to this Muslim Somali taxi driver the other day, and we have our disagreements, but one thing he was saying was a lot of people are losing their Muslim faith because they don't practice. Now you think it's the other way around, but he says, no, it's the practice that leads to faith. So I'd say to Carl or anyone else watching this who wants some religious belief, who wants some religious experience, not belief, that's the key thing, experience, as Jung said, is do the practices. Like go to church, get on your knees. What have you got to lose? Worst case scenario, it's a nice little meditation. It's a nice bit of quiet time. What are we on, 4 or 5? Well, I've lost track. Okay, numbers is my strength. So silence, right? That's a practice you can do. Sit quietly in a church 10 minutes a day. I do this after the gym. Go to the gym, walk in nature in the morning, go to the gym to get in my body. On the way back from the gym, there's a beautiful cathedral here. I'm so lucky. So lucky! Gratitude, there's another practice. Anyway, sit quietly in the church with my girlfriend for 10 minutes. It's not a big time investment. Now, I've done solitary meditation retreats. I've stayed in monasteries. Silence goes deep, whether it's Buddhist tradition. By the way, if you struggle with the Christian tradition, maybe you have some pain around that. The abusive priest or family that pushed it too hard. If you have some pain around your tradition of birth, Buddhism is a good place to start. For a lot of atheists, it's like go on retreat. I did a loving kindness Buddhist meditation retreat 20 years ago. 5 days of doing what's called metta, M-E-T-T-A, not the Facebook version. After 5 days, I loved everything. And I was like, this is pretty trippy. Even as someone who's done drugs, I was like, this is pretty trippy. The proof was in the experience, right? No one told me a convincing argument. I did the practice. Solitary retreats, very intense. Vipassana wouldn't necessarily recommend it for beginners, but it can be, most people that do a 10-day Vipassana retreat have some kind of spiritual experience. This is reliable. As I said, it's like, I always feel frustrated when I hear people say, oh, I'd struggle with spirituality. It's like, just do the practice. Get on your knees and pray, Sit quietly in a beautiful church. That's not hard work. Sit quietly. Turn your bloody phone off. Right? Turn your technology off some of the day and have quietude. Quietness is a spiritual practice. All right. What are we up to? I think I've hit most of the main... Actually, no, I haven't. There's a few more. All right. Service. Here's another one. Again, it puts one's narcissistic center. The modernity, consumer capitalism says you're serving you. Being of service. I know for a lot of people, parenthood is the beginning of their spiritual journey because they go, you know what, devoted, notice the word, service to something bigger than me, something else. And if you can do it with a child, you start going, okay, what am I really in service to? Yeah? I know a lot of women, once they get conservative, once they get red-pilled, like my girlfriend, they go, oh, I want to be of service. It's a very feminine path, I think. Men like the physical or the silence, the sitting there still or the praying on their knees. Service is also great. If you have a talent for this, I don't. I'm kind of a bit selfish, but it's good for me. I remember I stayed at a Buddhist monastery once and the abbot took one look at me. He said, you're cleaning the toilets. I was like, okay, humility, service, beautiful practice, beautiful practice. All right, the key thing here. Good resource for you. Roger Walsh's book, no relation, Australian, not my uncle. Roger Walsh, his book, Essential Spirituality, talks about some of these different technologies. And I think we're inclined towards certain ones. And when you begin, do what you're inclined to. If you're drawn to beauty, really seek, the artistic path as a way into spirituality, really embracing beauty. Like me, if you're physical, you need something intense because you're a young guy. If you're a woman, you're very devotional, you're just that way inclined, do that. Maybe it's a choir, right? I know a lot of people that find the transcendent in being in a choir, the communitas, it's called, altered state through community. It's the same thing at a football match, by the way. That's a spiritual experience for some people. Or a rave, there's this sense of community, communitas. Extreme sports, anything existential can do it. That can open it up to people. I know people, for example, I used to snowboard. I used to work on snowboard resorts. and they wouldn't really have a word for it. And sometimes I give them the language because I'm educated this way, but it was like they'd go out on their snowboard early in the morning, they'd see the beauty of creation, they'd have this extreme adrenaline rush, they'd be really in their bodies, they'd be having this existential, like I could die doing this. And then they'd come back and they'd say, you know what, my problems seem smaller, it feels like I'm more ethical. Ethics, underrated spiritual practice as a practice, not as a list of things to do. And I'd give them some language for this. Say, okay, this is what happened, this is what they can call it, this is traditions, this, and then they go do it consciously. And now their snowboarding would take on a whole new area. The same with surfing. Surfers are very devotional. They've got this nature connection, this existential element. They're entering flow states. Spirituality is not just about states, but states the way in. Yeah, so oceanic states, flow states, states of presence, mindful states, these are the ways in. So enforced mindfulness through yoga, through weightlifting, through martial arts, that's a good beginning, yeah. Community, doing spirituality without community is normally unwise. The community gives you guides, gives you accountability, stops you disappearing in your own backside. Community, join a church, you'll get spiritual. Yeah, be around spiritual people. We become who we're around, right? If you're around people who dress well, you start dressing better. If you're around rich people, you start getting tips, you start making more money, right? If you're around spiritual people, you will become more spiritual. So you can become more spiritual. This is a thing. There are practices you can do. So without this, there's a very bleak outlook on the world. And you hear that meaning crisis, that bleakness that Carl talks about in that interview. And I think that bleakness is a callback, with many people now being called back to tradition. I think if you can embrace your own tradition, I go to Catholic church for a reason. I feel like Buddhism and yoga to me is kind of like cosplay at this point. It was a good beginning, but now it just feels like dressing up. If I dress up in an Aikido outfit or Buddhist monastery, it's like, yeah, there's a tradition that's in my bones. If you can embrace your own tradition, great. I think people are called back to it because modern and postmodern life is so bleak. There's so much ugliness. There's so much clear. Just like they're not even hiding it anymore, are they? The fucking media, the governments, the corporations, they're not even hiding it. So this is a positive thing because in some ways there's so much evil and ugliness that we're drawn back to goodness and beauty. So there you go. I probably missed a few, but what I can tell you is this. If you have that impulse, like I heard Carl express, by the way, if you're watching this, Carl, hi, good work. Thank you for the Lotus Eaters and everything you do. Hope you don't mind the first name familiarity. If you're like Carl and you're watching this going, what do I do? There are options. The key thing is to do something, to do it every day. Like I have my own morning routine, usually a bit of meditation, a bit of prayer, go to the gym, spend a bit of time in nature. My girlfriend and I have some sacred practices I want to go into, but that's a daily thing. It's a daily thing for us. Do the practices, you will have the experience, and spirituality will open up. You won't need a clever argument from Alex O'Connor. You won't need some deontological philosophy. I mean, if you're intellectual, great. That is a way in intellectually. Traditionally, actually, in yoga, there is an intellectual yoga. But for most of us, the most important thing is to have these experiences. Like someone asked Jung, do you believe in God? He said, believe. This is the wrong paradigm. I experience God. For me, it's a part of my daily life, reorientating to my, we could say, best self, my higher power, my inner power, reorientating to that as a daily thing. This is not esoteric. This is straightforward. These practices exist. They're widely available on the internet. Another channel I'd recommend on YouTube on this is Richard IV. He's got 2 channels. One of them is about spirituality from a sort of right-wing perspective. I suspect this may be the rest of my life's work, actually, is bringing some of these practices to the emergent right that has that heart longing. So if you look at the world and you think it looks bad or ugly, you're right. You're right, but do not despair. No fear is what it says in the Bible. No fear. You're right. There's more. There's ways to access it. Happy to answer your questions in the comments. Carl, if you're out there, thank you and good luck.